The human ship cut through the vast expanse of space, its engines humming steadily as it drifted toward a small, uncharted planet. This was not a routine mission, though. The Federation had received strange signals from the planet's surface, a distress call, followed by silence. No one had ever visited this world before, and the human diplomat, James, was the first to step foot on its barren ground. As he stepped out of the ship, he felt the chill of the unknown air against his skin. The landscape was desolate, with jagged rock formations jutting out from the cracked earth. There was a strange stillness in the air, the kind that made every sound feel like an echo. But James wasn't here for a tour. He had a job to do. His mission was clear: investigate the source of the distress signal, and if necessary, offer aid. Hours passed, and the landscape remained eerily silent. Then, a sudden explosion in the distance shattered the quiet. James's heart raced as he sprinted toward the source of the sound, his boots pounding against the rocky surface. He reached a cliff edge and looked down into a ravine where chaos was unfolding. The alien queen, magnificent and towering even in her moment of peril, was surrounded by hostile alien soldiers. They had her pinned against the rocky terrain, and from the looks of it, she had been wounded in the battle. Her armor, once gleaming and regal, was scratched and scorched from the assault. The Queen's people were known for their advanced technology and fierce warrior culture, but it was clear that they were outnumbered here. Without thinking, James reached for his weapon. He wasn't trained as a soldier, but he had fought in a few skirmishes. This was different. This was a diplomatic mission gone wrong, and he knew he couldn't allow a powerful figure like the Queen to die at the hands of these attackers. The galaxy couldn't afford that kind of loss. With a deep breath, James activated his blaster. The first shot rang out, hitting one of the attackers square in the chest. The others froze for a moment, unsure where the shot had come from. Taking advantage of the distraction, James rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He aimed and fired again, knocking down another soldier before they even had a chance to react. The hostile forces, realizing the odds were shifting, began retreating. The Queen, though injured, managed to stand, watching the human with a mixture of surprise and wariness. She had heard of humans, but never had she witnessed one act so boldly, so recklessly. James moved cautiously toward her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice tense but filled with concern. The Queen studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the human. She had never been saved by one of his kind before. Humans were known for their curiosity, but they were rarely a force to be reckoned with. And yet, here was this man, standing before her, defying the odds and saving her life. "I'm fine, for now," she replied, her voice commanding, yet strangely soft. "But why did you help me?" James paused, glancing at the wreckage of the battle around them. "Because it's the right thing to do. No one should be left to die alone, not even you." The alien queen was silent for a moment, considering his words. In her world, power meant survival, and allies were forged through bloodshed, not kindness. But this human, this strange, courageous creature, was something different. For a brief moment, their eyes locked. And in that instant, both of them knew their lives had just taken an unexpected turn. The days after the battle were tense. The human, James, had stayed by the alien queen's side as she recovered from her wounds. She had insisted that he not stay, that he return to his ship, but James remained. There was something compelling about her strength and authority that made him feel connected to her in a way he hadn't expected. The Queen's name was Zarethia, and she ruled over an empire that stretched across several planets. She was known for her intelligence and fierce leadership, but even she could not escape the dangers of a universe filled with enemies. Her wounds had been deep, and it took her a few days to regain her full strength. But now she stood tall again, her regal posture unmarred by the pain she had suffered. Zarethia studied James from across the room, where he sat on a chair, quietly observing her. He had offered her aid without hesitation, not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. To her, that was foreign. In her world, loyalty and loyalty alone meant survival. She had not known a human to act without expecting something in return. "You saved my life," she said suddenly, her voice echoing in the silence. James looked up from his thoughts, surprised by the sudden shift in their conversation. "I did what anyone would have done." The Queen stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as if trying to gauge whether his words were truly sincere. She had always been surrounded by individuals who sought to gain something, but James did not seem like that. "Not everyone would have," Zerathia replied, "and that's why I owe you my life." James shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure how to respond. The Queen was not one to speak lightly of favors owed. Her people valued strength above all else, and for her to acknowledge weakness in herself was rare. She had always relied on her power and cunning, not on others for help. He stood up and moved toward the large window overlooking the desolate planet outside. The landscape was barren, much like the situation he found himself in. He had no idea what to expect next, but he knew one thing for certain: his encounter with the Queen had changed everything. The lines between ally and enemy were beginning to blur. "You don't owe me anything," James said finally. "I wasn't looking for any kind of payment. I just couldn't leave you there to die." Zerathia studied him silently, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she considered his words carefully. Humans, she had heard, were unpredictable. Some said they were emotional. Others said they were resilient beyond measure. Zerathia was beginning to believe that both statements were true. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I've spent my life trusting only those who can show their worth through strength and power. But you acted from something else. From kindness, perhaps. I don't understand it, but I respect it." James didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't sure if he deserved respect from someone like her, a queen of immense power and authority. But he didn't have to say anything. The silence between them was enough. "I wish I could return the favor," Zerathia continued, her tone now more serious. "But I don't know what I can give you in return. Not in a way you would understand." James turned to face her, meeting her gaze. "You don't have to give me anything. It was my choice to help you, and I'm glad I did." For the first time since their meeting, Zerathia smiled. A small, almost imperceptible shift in her features, but it was there. James wasn't sure if he had earned her trust, but he knew one thing: their journey together was just beginning, and it would change both their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. The days turned into weeks, and the quiet planet slowly began to feel more like a temporary home than a battlefield. The alien queen, Zerathia, and James continued their unusual alliance, both still unsure of what it would ultimately lead to. The planet's natural resources were being used to treat Zerathia's injuries, but even as she healed, her mind remained troubled. She had spent her entire life in power, relying on strength and war. The idea of a simple human, someone she considered so different from her kind, saving her life had shaken the foundation of everything she believed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Zerathia called James to meet her in the royal chambers. She stood by a massive stone table, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The Queen's regal figure was silhouetted against the dim light, and for the first time since their meeting, she seemed to carry a different kind of energy, one that was not driven by anger or duty, but something else entirely. James walked into the room, his boots clicking lightly on the stone floor. The Queen was standing with her back to him, her posture straight and proud. He could sense the tension in the room, and his heart rate quickened. He had no idea what to expect next. "James," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking." "About what?" he asked, wary of the change in her tone. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. "About your actions, your selflessness. I've seen countless warriors fight for their lives, but you fought for mine, and for that, you have my gratitude." But I have realized something else. I can't ignore it anymore. James frowned. What do you mean? Zarathia's expression softened, but there was a flicker of something dangerous behind her gaze. She took a step closer, the air between them thick with unspoken words. I offer you something, James. Something no one has ever offered you, or anyone of your kind, for that matter. James tilted his head, confused. What do you mean? The Queen took a deep breath, her regal composure slipping for just a moment. I propose a union between us, not just as allies, but as partners. A marriage. The words hit him like a slap to the face. Marriage. He blinked, struggling to understand the meaning behind it. She couldn't possibly be serious. He had saved her life, yes, but this was something else entirely. Why? He finally asked, his voice betraying his shock. You're the Queen. You could choose any ally, any powerful being. Why me? Zarathia's eyes darkened. I need a partner, someone who can stand beside me, who can help me rule. My empire is weakening, and a strong alliance is necessary to ensure its survival. Your kind is young and unpredictable, but there is a strength in that. You have shown courage and compassion, qualities I don't see in many others. Your actions speak louder than your race. James took a step back, feeling a mix of awe and confusion. But a marriage? Why do you need me that way? Zarathia's gaze never wavered. In my culture, strength isn't just about power, it's about unity. To rule, one must have someone to share that rule with. Your skills, your humanity. It's the kind of strength I need. You saved my life. Now, I offer you a chance to join me in ruling a kingdom. James was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. He had never expected anything like this. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do. But this proposal, it seemed like a trap, a political move. I don't know what to say, he murmured, his thoughts spinning. Zarathia's expression softened just slightly. You don't have to answer now, but consider it, James. You have the chance to change everything, not just for yourself, but for your people. An alliance like this could change the galaxy. The weight of her words pressed down on him. As he looked at the Queen, he could see the sincerity in her eyes. But he also knew that this was a decision that could alter everything. A marriage, a partnership. Could he truly trust her? Could he truly trust himself? For the first time, James realized that this journey, this unexpected encounter, was only just beginning. James stood in the royal chambers, staring at the alien queen, Zarathia, who had just made a proposal that seemed both impossible and unimaginable. Marriage. To an alien queen. The idea rattled around in his mind, refusing to settle. He had come to this planet to offer aid, to do his part as a human diplomat. But now everything was more complicated than ever. Zarathia was watching him closely, waiting for a response. Her gaze was steady, her posture regal, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was the ruler of an entire empire, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and yet here she was, offering him a chance to stand beside her. It was an honor, but it was also terrifying. James, she said, breaking the silence, her voice calm but laced with a quiet tension. I understand this is a lot to process. You don't have to decide right away, but I want you to think about what this means. This is more than just a political move. It's about survival, for both of us. James rubbed his temples, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on being level-headed, on making decisions based on reason and not emotion. But nothing about this situation made sense. Why would an alien queen, who could easily rule with her power and technology, choose him, a mere human, as her partner? He took a step back and looked around the room, his eyes tracing the intricate alien designs on the walls. This room, this planet, it all felt so alien to him now. Everything had changed in the blink of an eye. Survival, James repeated, trying to wrap his mind around the words. You're offering me marriage for survival. I'm just one man. You need an army, not a partner. Zarathia's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. It's not just about armies, James. I need someone who understands what it means to fight for something more than power. Your species is young, yes, but you have a strength in your resolve, in your compassion. I've never seen anything like it in my own people. I believe this partnership could change the course of history. James took a deep breath. He had never considered himself a savior, never imagined he would be at the center of something so grand. He had acted out of instinct, out of a desire to do what was right. But now, it seemed like that moment had led him down a path he couldn't walk back from. I don't know what you want me to say, Zarathia, James said, his voice quieter now, filled with uncertainty. I didn't come here to make alliances. I didn't come here to rule. I came to help because it was the right thing to do. Zarathia stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. And yet, you have done more than just help. You have shown me that there is another way. You have shown me the kind of strength I have been searching for, a strength that cannot be measured by weapons or armies. That is why I offer you this. I believe that together, we can lead in a way that no one else can. The weight of her words pressed down on him. Could he truly do this? Could he accept the offer, marry an alien queen, and change the fate of an empire? Could he trust her, and could he trust himself to rise to this challenge? James closed his eyes for a moment, trying to clear his mind. He had always been a man of action, but this was a decision that went far beyond what he had ever faced. His life, and the future of an entire empire, were now on his shoulders. I need time to think, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zarathia nodded, her eyes softening. Take all the time you need. But know this, James, what you decide will shape not only your future, but the future of my people. The future of the galaxy. As James turned to leave, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision before him, he couldn't help but wonder if he had just stepped into a role that was far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. James sat in the quiet of his room, staring out into the endless expanse of space. His thoughts swirled like a storm, each one more confusing than the last. The decision Zarathia had offered him weighed heavily on his mind. A partnership, a marriage to a queen, to a ruler of an empire. The idea seemed impossible, yet something about it felt right. But could he trust it? Could he trust her? As the days passed, he couldn't escape the feeling that something deeper was happening between them, something he hadn't expected. He thought of the way Zarathia looked at him, not just with the eyes of a queen, but with the eyes of someone who was searching for something she had never found in her own people. And now she was offering him a chance to find it with her. That evening, the summons came. Zarathia wanted to speak with him. The request was simple, but it still made his heart beat faster. Was this another attempt to convince him, or was there something else she needed to say? When James entered the royal chambers, he saw her standing by the window. The light from the stars outside made her look even more powerful, yet there was something different about her tonight. Her back was not as straight, her shoulders not as squared. There was a vulnerability in the way she stood that James had never seen before. James, Zarathia said softly, turning to face him. I need to talk to you. Her voice was different, softer, more open than before. For a moment, James didn't know what to say. The queen, the ruler of an empire, was standing before him as if she was unsure of herself. He had always seen her as someone who held immense power, someone who never showed weakness. But now she was showing him something different. She was showing him the side of herself that she rarely, if ever, let others see. Are you all right? James asked, taking a cautious step forward. Zarathia looked down for a moment, as if searching for the right words. I've spent my entire life ruling, fighting, and conquering, she began, her voice barely a whisper. But in all that time, I have never trusted anyone. Not fully. I've never allowed myself to be vulnerable with anyone. But with you, it's different. James felt his heart tighten at her words. He had never expected to hear the queen speak like this. The powerful ruler was revealing a side of herself he had never imagined. "You saved me," Zerathia continued, lifting her gaze to meet his. "And for the first time, I allowed myself to depend on someone, to trust. But now, I realize I've been hiding behind my title, behind my power. I've been hiding from what I truly need, what I truly want." James didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to reassure her, to tell her that he didn't expect anything from her in return. But another part of him felt something more. He could see her, truly see her, for the first time. Not just as a queen, but as a woman who had been carrying the weight of an empire alone for far too long. "I don't know what to offer you, James," Zerathia said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I know that I need you. Not just for this kingdom, but for me. I need someone who will stand beside me, who will trust me as I trust them. Someone who isn't afraid to challenge me when needed, but who also knows when to stand by me." James took a deep breath, feeling the enormity of her words. This wasn't just about politics. This was about a real connection, a bond that went beyond what he had ever imagined. "I've always been alone," Zerathia admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I've never had anyone I could trust completely. But with you, I feel like there's a chance for something different." James stepped closer, his heart racing. He could see the queen's raw vulnerability, and for the first time, he understood why she had proposed the marriage. It wasn't just for political gain. It was because she needed him, just as much as he needed her. "I don't know if I'm the right person," James said, his voice gentle but filled with sincerity. "But I'll try. I'll stand with you, Zerathia. I will." The queen looked at him, her eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before, hope. And in that moment, James realized that this was no longer just about survival or alliances. It was about two people, two souls, finding a way to trust each other in a universe that was often unforgiving. For the first time since his arrival, James felt like he was no longer an outsider. He was part of something much bigger than himself. And whatever happened next, he knew he wasn't going to face it alone. The next few days were filled with silence. Not uncomfortable silence, but a quiet understanding between James and Zerathia. They had crossed an invisible line, and both were aware that their paths were now irrevocably intertwined. It wasn't just about politics or survival anymore. It was about trust. Trust that they would both need in order to move forward, especially when the challenges ahead seemed insurmountable. Zerathia called for him one evening, her voice as commanding as ever, yet there was an undertone of something else, something that made James' heart race. He had come to understand the queen in a way he hadn't expected, but he also knew she wasn't someone who made decisions lightly. Her invitation to meet her that evening felt different. When he arrived at her chambers, he found her standing by the large stone table again, her hands clasped behind her back. The room was lit only by the soft glow of distant stars. The faint hum of the ship's machinery was the only sound in the otherwise still air. "James," she said as he entered, her voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking about what comes next." "All right," James replied, stepping closer. He couldn't hide the curiosity in his voice. What was she thinking? Was this about the proposal again, or something else entirely? Zerathia turned to face him, her piercing eyes studying him with the intensity that only a queen could possess. "You've shown me that there is more to you than just what I expected. You are more than just a soldier or a diplomat. You've shown courage and integrity. But that was just one moment, one decision. I need to know if I can count on you, James. Not just in the small things, but in the big ones. The things that could change everything." James raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight of her words. "What do you mean?" Zerathia's lips pressed together, as though she was weighing her next words carefully. "I am offering you a place at my side, as my partner, my equal. But I need to know that you can stand with me when the pressure mounts, when we face threats that neither of us could imagine. This is not just about us. This is about my empire, my people, your people, the future of everything we know." She stepped closer to him, her presence commanding and undeniable. "There will be times when you have to make difficult decisions. You may not always agree with me, and I may not always agree with you, but we will face it together if you truly want this." James swallowed hard. He had been a part of wars, of battles where decisions were made in the heat of the moment, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about survival. This was about leadership, about standing side by side with someone who could change the fate of an entire galaxy. And to do that, he would have to put his trust in her, completely. "I've always believed in making the right choice, even if it's the hard one," James said slowly, meeting her eyes with a steady gaze. "But I've never had to make decisions like this. I'm willing to try, Zerathia. I'm willing to stand by you and fight for what's right. But you have to know that I can't do it blindly. I need to understand more. I need to know what we're really up against." Zerathia nodded, as if she had been expecting this answer. "I wouldn't want you to follow me blindly. But you need to understand the truth. My enemies are not just other species. They are those within my own empire, those who would see me overthrown. There is a rebellion brewing, and there are factions who see you as an obstacle, not an ally. If you truly stand with me, you will be tested." James felt a chill run down his spine. A rebellion within her own empire. That changed everything. This was no longer just about saving a queen. It was about fighting for something much bigger. He had thought he was being drawn into a political marriage, but this was a war. "I'm ready," he said, his voice stronger now. "Whatever it takes." Zerathia studied him for a long moment before finally speaking again. "Then let the test begin, James. This is not just about us. It's about the galaxy. And it starts now." James felt the weight of her words settle in. They were about to face something that could change everything. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going into it alone. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The days following Zerathia's revelation about the rebellion were tense. James had never imagined he would be thrown into something so complex. He had come to the planet to help, to offer his expertise, but now he found himself caught in the heart of an intergalactic power struggle. The rebellion was real, and it was growing stronger by the day. Zerathia's enemies were inside her own empire, scheming to overthrow her and take control. But for James, something had shifted. The weight of the situation was starting to crush him. The offer of marriage, the alliance with Zerathia, which had seemed like a chance to help and make a difference, was now tangled with complications he hadn't anticipated. The rebellion, the enemies within her empire, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. He wasn't sure he could trust that he and Zerathia were truly on the same side, or if he was just another pawn in her game for survival. It was one late evening when James found himself standing alone in the quiet hallways of the royal palace. The corridors, dimly lit by the soft glow of alien lights, felt as if they were closing in on him. His thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and uncertainty. He needed answers. He needed to know if this alliance was truly what it seemed. The trust Zerathia had asked from him, the vulnerability she had shown, was it real? Or was it all just part of the strategy? As if the universe had heard his thoughts, Zerathia's voice echoed down the hall. "James." He turned, and there she stood, as regal as ever, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of curiosity and worry. She had sensed his distance, his uncertainty. She had seen the way he had been withdrawing, and now she was here to find out why. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice soft but commanding. James nodded, though his heart was heavy. He couldn't do this anymore. He couldn't pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. He had to face her. He had to face the truth. They walked together in silence to her private chambers, the air between them thick with the tension of unspoken words. Once they entered, Zerathia closed the door behind them, her gaze never leaving his face. "What is it, James?" she asked, her tone gentle but with an edge of concern. "I can see you've been troubled. You've been distant. What's happening?" James swallowed hard. feeling the weight of the decision that had been building in his mind. He looked at Zarethia, at the queen who had trusted him with her life and her empire, and felt a pang of guilt. But there was no turning back now. "I can't do it," he said, his voice steady, but filled with a sadness he couldn't hide. "I can't marry you, Zarethia. Not like this. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can trust the situation, or if I'm just being used for some greater purpose. I can't go into this blind. I can't be a pawn in your fight for power." Zarethia's expression faltered for the first time since they had met. For a brief moment, James thought he saw pain in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a mask of determination. "You think I'm using you?" she asked, her voice tight. "You think I would manipulate you after everything we've been through?" James took a step back, feeling the tension rise between them. "I don't know anymore. I don't know what's real. I don't know if you want me by your side because you truly trust me, or because I'm the only ally you have left." Zarethia's eyes softened, but there was a quiet fury behind them. "I offered you my trust, James. I offered you everything. But you're right. You're right to question everything. It's not an easy choice, and I've never asked for someone to follow me blindly. But what you're asking, what you're suggesting, is that I'm not worth it." James looked down, feeling the weight of her words. He had never wanted to hurt her, but he couldn't ignore the doubts swirling in his mind. He needed more than just her promises. He needed proof that this was real, that they were both fighting for the same cause. "I can't do this," James repeated, his voice quieter this time. "Not yet. Maybe I can't do it at all." Zarethia didn't respond immediately. She stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a chasm that neither of them could cross. Finally, she spoke. "Then go," she said, her voice low, but there was no anger in it, only resignation. "If you cannot trust me, then leave. There is no place for doubt in what we are trying to do. If you cannot stand with me, then it is better that you walk away now." James felt a sharp pang in his chest. He wanted to reach out to her, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. He couldn't give her the answer she wanted. Not yet, and maybe not ever. With one final, silent glance, he turned and walked away. The days that followed James's rejection were some of the hardest he had ever faced. The air between him and Zarethia felt thick, as though the very walls of the palace could sense the tension that lingered between them. Every time they passed each other, there was an uncomfortable silence, a quiet space where trust had once been. James had spent countless hours alone in his quarters, staring at the stars outside the window, trying to make sense of the decision he had made. He had rejected Zarethia's offer, her proposal of partnership, of marriage. But now, as the days dragged on, the weight of his choice became harder to bear. He had trusted his instincts before, but this wasn't like any decision he had made in the past. This wasn't about strategy or a simple mission. It was about a bond, a connection that was growing stronger by the day. He had seen a side of Zarethia no one else had seen, the vulnerable queen who, despite her power and dominance, was still just a person trying to survive in a brutal world. But the rebellion was real, and James knew that every moment of hesitation could cost them both everything. He couldn't turn his back on her. And yet, every time he thought about approaching her, a wave of doubt held him back. He had walked away once, and the fear of rejection, of being seen as weak, kept him at a distance. It wasn't until the third day after their confrontation that Zarethia sought him out. It was late in the evening, the shadows long and the silence in the palace almost overwhelming. James was standing near the observation window when he heard a soft knock at the door. He turned to see Zarethia standing in the doorway. Her usual commanding presence was replaced with something softer. Her posture was less rigid, her expression more open. "I need to speak with you," she said quietly, stepping inside without waiting for a response. James didn't know what to say. The weight of their last conversation still hung between them, but there was something in her eyes now that he hadn't seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was understanding. Zarethia closed the door behind her footsteps slow as she walked toward him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the ship's engines, the distant stars outside casting a pale light across the room. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice steady but not without emotion. "About trusting you, about asking for your loyalty. And I realized something important." James raised an eyebrow, his heart quickening. What was she getting at? "I spent my entire life relying on power," Zarethia continued, her voice low. "On force, on fear. I built my empire by showing nothing but strength, by hiding my weaknesses. But you didn't ask for my strength. You didn't expect anything from me. You offered your trust without a second thought, and in return I offered you my kingdom. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't real trust." James stood in silence, his gaze fixed on her. He could see the weight of her words in her eyes, the vulnerability she had been hiding all this time. "I never knew how to ask for help," she said softly, her eyes never leaving his. "I never knew how to let anyone in. But what you said, what you showed me, made me realize that maybe there's more to ruling than just power. Maybe there's more to this partnership than I first understood." James took a step forward, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not asking for your power, Zarethia. I'm asking for your trust. I don't want to be a part of something just because it's the right political move. I want to stand with you, not just as an ally, but as someone who believes in what we're doing." Zarethia nodded slowly, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "And I'm asking for the same. I was wrong to push you away, to ask for more than you were ready to give. I was wrong to think that this could be about power. It has to be about us, about what we're building together. And I want you to be a part of that, James. Not because you have to, but because you choose to." The room felt still as the weight of her words sank in. James felt a shift in the air, as if something had broken between them, something that had been holding them both back. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking down for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "I was wrong, and I didn't see that before. I need you, James, not just for this kingdom, but for me." James stepped closer, his heart finally easing. He could feel the sincerity in her words. The queen who had once seemed untouchable was now standing before him, humbled and real. And in that moment, James knew that their journey together, whatever it would look like, was only just beginning. The days passed in a blur. After their conversation, there was a new sense of understanding between James and Zarethia. The walls that had once separated them, both literal and figurative, began to crumble. They worked together to address the growing threats within the empire, planning and strategizing as allies, not just as queen and soldier. But beneath the surface of their partnership, something else was brewing. The unspoken bond between them had deepened, and both knew it. Despite the tension in the air, the progress they made was undeniable. They were learning to trust each other. Zarethia had shown him her vulnerabilities, and James had offered his loyalty, not as a mere subject, but as an equal. But even with that trust growing, one question still lingered, one that neither of them had truly addressed. Could they truly make this work? James spent hours in the quiet of his quarters, wrestling with his thoughts. The rebellion was growing stronger by the day, and the pressure on Zarethia's rule was immense. The truth was, their alliance was not just about political survival, it was about their future together. Yet, despite everything that had passed between them, the idea of marrying the queen, of becoming her equal in such a public and powerful way, felt like a leap into the unknown. Could he really commit to this? Could he truly stand by her through everything? And more importantly, did he feel ready to be a part of her world? Zarethia, too, had her own doubts. The rebellion wasn't just a threat to her power. It was a threat to everything she had ever known. She had spent her life building her empire, using strength and authority to keep control. Now the idea of sharing that power with someone else, Someone as unpredictable and human as James was unsettling. Could she really allow him into her world in such an intimate way? Could she trust him not just with her empire, but with her heart? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Zerathia sought out James. He was standing by the window, looking out at the stars, lost in thought. She approached him quietly, her presence as commanding as ever, but her voice softer this time, almost hesitant. "James," she said, her voice breaking the silence. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Zerathia," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. She paused for a moment, then took a step closer. "I've been thinking about what you said, about trust, about our future." James nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. And I think it's time to stop waiting. I can't keep running from what's in front of me." "What's in front of us?" she said softly, her gaze never leaving his. "I want you by my side, James. Not as a political move, but because I believe in you, and I believe in us." James felt a weight lift off his shoulders as she spoke. He had been unsure for so long, unsure of his place in this strange, dangerous world that had pulled him in. But now, with Zerathia standing before him, it felt clearer than ever. He took a deep breath, letting the moment settle between them. "I've been running too," he admitted. "I've been afraid to make a decision, afraid to trust that what we have could be real. But I don't want to run anymore. I want to stand with you, Zerathia. I want to be with you, whatever that means." Zerathia's eyes softened, and for the first time, James saw the vulnerability she had kept hidden for so long. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to gently touch his arm. "Then let's face it together," she said, her voice firm with determination but tender with emotion. In that moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. The rebellion, the battles, the struggles, they were all still there, but they felt distant, as if they no longer held the power they once had. Together, James and Zerathia stood united, not just in their fight for survival, but in their choice to trust each other, to fight for each other. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face it together. And in that unity, they found strength that neither of them had known they possessed. The tension in the air had finally lifted. James and Zerathia stood side by side in the heart of her palace, a place that had once felt cold and impersonal. But now it felt different, warmer, more like a home. They had spent the past few days preparing for what was to come. The rebellion was still a real and dangerous threat, but with their newfound alliance, there was a sense of purpose in the air, a sense of unity that had never existed before. Zerathia had sent out a message to her people, calling for a council. It was time to take a stand, to prove that her leadership was not something that could be easily overturned. James stood by her side as she addressed her subjects, her voice steady and filled with authority. This was no longer just about political maneuvering. It was about something deeper. It was about trust, loyalty, and the belief that together they could bring about real change. The council hall was filled with tension as the leaders of the various factions arrived, their eyes studying James carefully. He could feel the weight of their gazes on him. He was still the outsider, the human who had somehow managed to earn a seat at the table. But as Zerathia spoke, her words steady and confident, James realized that his place here wasn't just because of the alliance they had formed. It was because he had earned it, through his actions, his courage, and his willingness to stand by her side when no one else would. "I have called this meeting," Zerathia began, her voice echoing through the hall, "to discuss our future. The rebellion within our empire grows stronger, but I will not allow it to tear us apart. We are stronger together, and with the support of those who truly believe in our cause, we will prevail." Her eyes swept over the room, landing on James. This man, James, has proven that strength is not always measured in power. It is measured in the choices we make, the loyalty we show, and the trust we give. He stands with me, and together we will rebuild what has been broken. There was a long silence in the room. The leaders exchanged glances, some skeptical, some uncertain, but all listening. James stood beside Zarethia, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment that would define their future, not just as allies, but as partners. As the quiet murmur of conversation spread through the council, James realized that he was no longer an outsider. He was a part of something much larger. "I stand with Zarethia," James said, his voice strong and clear. "And I stand with all of you if you are willing to fight for what is right. This rebellion is not just about power. It is about our future, our children, our families. It is about a future where we don't have to live in fear." His words hung in the air, powerful and simple. The room fell silent again. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt like a turning point. One by one, the leaders stood, each offering their support. The rebellion's strength was fading. Unity was beginning to replace division. As the council ended, Zarethia turned to James, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did it," she said, her voice soft, but filled with emotion. "You helped me see what I couldn't on my own. Together, we are stronger than I ever thought possible." James looked at her, the queen who had once seemed so distant, so unreachable. Now she was someone he could trust, someone he could fight for. "We did it," he corrected her, a smile tugging at his lips. As they walked through the palace, side by side, James knew that this was only the beginning. They had overcome the first challenge, but there would be many more to come. Together, though, they were ready to face whatever the future held. They didn't just have an empire to rebuild. They had a future to build together, one built on trust, loyalty, and the belief that anything was possible if they stood together. And with that, a new chapter began.